without further ado, we're going to talk about one of the most controversial members of the revolutionary generation, and that is Benedict Arnold. So we'll explore the life and times of Benedict Arnold. And without further ado, Billy Griffith, please take it away.
All right, let's get my presentation up here. And here we go. All right, well, hi, I am Billy Griffith with Emerging Revolutionary War, and today I'm coming to you live from my bedroom to talk to you about the trials and treason of Benedict Arnold. Now, I'm going to try to make a valiant attempt to sum up Benedict Arnold's controversial and very complex life in under an hour. So bear with me as I try to very simplify his motives for turning coat and betraying the cause of liberty and joining the British Army. The story of Benedict Arnold's treason during the Revolutionary War is one of the most infamous yet tragic in our nation's history. He was the American Hannibal, the most brilliant battlefield commander during the conflict's early stages. His patriotism, sacrifice, and commitment to the cause of independence were matched by few in the American high command. So too were his battle honors. Arnold's treason was not something that was predetermined. His ultimate defection to the British in 1780 was the result of many factors that continued to pile up as the war progressed, but it can be rooted in a long-running feeling of being underappreciated and a growing distrust in America's political leaders. This presentation will provide a snippet profile into the life and service of Arnold. My hope is that it will offer better context for you regarding who this man was, what he sacrificed, and his trajectory towards ultimate treason. So Benedict Arnold V was born January 14th, 1741 in Norwich, Connecticut, to Benedict Arnold IV and Hannah Lathrop. He was his great-great-grandfather, William Arnold, had come to Massachusetts Bay Colony in the 1630s, and in 1636 joined Roger Williams in settling Rhode Island as a religious haven. And this was something that Arnold himself would be very proud of, to be kind of one of the cornerstone families in the founding of our nation. Benedict Arnold's father moved to Norwich and began a life as a merchant, marrying his boss's widow, Hannah Lathrop, after he died, acquiring substantial wealth. And the Arnold's first son, Benedict V, was born in 1738, but died in infancy. So in January 1741, when our Benedict is born, he was actually given the name of his older brother. And this was common for the time when childhood deaths were fairly frequent. So the Arnolds would have four more children: Hannah, who would be by Benedict Arnold's side for the majority of their lives; Mary, Absalom King, who was named after his mother's first husband; and Elizabeth. Arnold grew up on Norwich's docks, observing his father's work and even accompanying him on some of his journeys to the West Indies. This is where he will get his love for the sea, and he himself will become a merchant captain later in life. In the fall of 1752, when Benedict was 11, his parents sent him to a boarding school run by Hannah's cousin, James Cogswell. They were preparing him to receive higher education at Yale. Benedict was a daredevil and a hellraiser at home, and his mother hoped Cogswell would keep him in line. Unfortunately, tragedy began to strike the Arnolds' home. The following summer, a disease outbreak in Norwich took the lives of Mary and Elizabeth, two of Benedict's younger sisters. 3 years prior to that, his younger brother Absalom had succumbed to disease too at the age of 3. With the loss of his daughters and financial hardships setting in, Benedict Arnold IV turned to the bottle heavily and drank his social standing into the ground. The young Benedict was pulled out of school the next year to assist the family at home. Upon his return, Hannah secured an apprenticeship for her son under two of her cousins, Daniel and Joshua Lathrop. Both of them were apothecaries working in Norwich. Benedict flourished at this, and by 1762, he was asked to expand the Lathrop's business and open his own apothecary in New Haven, Connecticut. By then, he did not have much left in Norwich besides a stained family reputation because of his father. His mother died in 1759, and his father passed 2 years later. Hannah, his sister, was literally the only person left in his life. Rise in business and to rebellion. Arnold, who received his inventory on credit from merchants in London, set up shop near Yale and took advantage of the college town and the growing port in New Haven. He sold medicines, books, and other imported goods not widely found elsewhere. Business boomed, and Arnold purchased some trading vessels too. He invited his sister Hannah down from Norwich to help him run his store. And you can see here an image of Arnold's original sign that once hung outside of his store, and that is in possession of the New Haven Museum today. And then up in the top right, that will be the home of him and his future wife on Water Street in New Haven, which no longer stands today. But one of these business ventures that Arnold's going to undertake is buying horses in Canada, which is actually going to take him north via the Lake Champlain, Lake George, and Hudson River route. It is here when most likely he caught a glimpse of the dilapidated state of Fort Ticonderoga, which he will play a large part in capturing at the outbreak of the Revolution. Arnold strongly opposed Parliament's restrictions on colonial trade and the taxation acts that were passed. They hurt his business, quite frankly. On one occasion in 1766, on a return trip from the West Indies, one of Arnold's crewmen is going to threaten to turn him into customs officials after he planned to avoid paying tax on his molasses. Arnold threatened the man, and with his crew, they carried the man to a public whipping post and distributed 40 lashes for all to see. Already, Benedict Arnold is showing others that he is not somebody to be trifled with. Arnold's social standing as an ardent patriot would continue to rise in the years to come. In the meantime, on February 22nd, 1767, he marries his first wife, Margaret Peggy Mansfield. Together, they had 3 sons, Benedict VI, Richard, and Henry. Now, it's interesting to note that Benedict VI will actually become a captain in the British Army during the Napoleonic Wars and will be killed in 1895 fighting in Jamaica. So as tension between Britain and her colonies escalated following the Boston Massacre in 1770, Arnold is going to write a friend. He says, quote, "I was very much shocked the other day on hearing the accounts of the most cruel, wanton, and inhuman murders committed in Boston by the soldiers. Good God, are the Americans all asleep and tamely giving up their liberties? Or have they all turned philosophers that they don't take immediate vengeance on such miscreants?" Well, Arnold would soon enough get his chance to take immediate vengeance when he was made captain of New Haven's governor's 2nd Company of Guards in March 1755. This is a militia unit. Following the bloodshed at Lexington and Concord the next month, Arnold, against the wishes of local leaders, demands and receives access to the town's arms and ammunition and marches with his militia towards Boston. But after arriving at Cambridge, Arnold pitches a plan to capture Fort Ticonderoga along Lake Champlain and its cannons to the Massachusetts Committee of Safety. He's commissioned a colonel and ordered to raise 400 men. But before recruitment is complete, Arnold's actually going to learn that there's another plan already in motion to capture the fort. Men under the command of Ethan Allen and the Green Mountain Boys of present-day Vermont are going to be enlisted by some financial gurus in Connecticut to capture the fort and its equipment. So Arnold rides ahead and agrees to accompany Allen's force, even though he believes he should rightfully command because of his legitimate commission. Allen's men, however, refuse to serve under Arnold, so he will just accompany them and after the agreement of not giving any orders himself. And over 80 men are going to cross Lake Champlain on May 10th, 1755, and they are going to burst their way into the fort and demand its surrender, and its garrison itself will be turned over to Allen and Arnold. Now, this is one of the more famous images of the capture of Fort Ticonderoga, and here we can see Ethan Allen demanding the surrender of the fort's captain, William Delaplace. Well, really, this did not happen. It's been blown out of proportion, mainly because Allen himself and those who supported him wanted to force Allen into the status of myth. Arnold is actually the one who's going to be demanding the surrender in a more military sense, while Allen is kind of threatening everybody he sees to turn over the fort. But because of this capture, over 50 cannons from it are eventually going to be carried down to Boston to assist Washington's army in expelling the British from that city. This will be one of the first, if not the first, real victory for the Americans during the war. Well, on May 18th, Arnold's going to lead another raid towards St. John's near the Richelieu River at the northern end of Lake Champlain. And he successfully captures 4 bateaux, 1 sloop, 13 British soldiers, and a handful of supplies. But despite this, he's going to learn that the Massachusetts Provincial Congress is actually investigating his conduct and behavior at Fort Ticonderoga because one of Arnold's rivals, James Easton, is going to be sending the actual report of the assault to the Massachusetts Provincial Congress, and another one, James Brown or John Brown, is going to be sending it to the Continental Congress. Both of them are supporters of Allen, and they hate Arnold, so they're going to immediately make sure that Arnold's name is blackened, and hopefully his role in the capture of the fort is completely stricken from the record. Things get even worse for Arnold when he learns that his wife, Peggy, has died on June 19, 1775, leaving their 3 sons motherless and Arnold heartbroken, and now also stricken with an early form of gout, which will plague him for the rest of his life. He returns home to New Haven to settle his personal matters and to figure out what to do next. After 2 weeks home, he's going to decide that this idle life is going to kill him, and he needs to return to the front. So he's going to leave his children with his sister Hannah, travels to the American camp outside of Boston, and is commissioned a colonel in the Continental Army to lead an expedition of 1,000 volunteers over 300 miles north through the Maine wilderness to converge with another army under General Richard Montgomery and capture the city of Quebec, hopefully claiming Canada as the 14th colony and potentially 14th state here in the United States. So on New Year's Eve morning, 1775, Arnold and Montgomery are going to assault the city's defenses from 2 directions. It's going to be a bloodbath and a disaster. Arnold himself, as seen in this image, is going to be severely wounded when a ricochet ball strikes his lower leg. He'll be carried off the field, still urging his men forward. Montgomery, on the other side of town, is killed almost instantly in the action, and the attack fails as over 400 Americans are made prisoner. But Arnold's going to remain in Quebec, and he refuses to lift the siege. He's promoted to brigadier general for his service, and he's elevated now to the status of a resilient patriot leader. But the Americans will eventually be forced to retreat in the summer of 1776. And as they are stepping offshore and preparing to move into New York, Arnold is going to be the last one to step foot on a boat and leave Canada. So moving forward to the fall of 1776 now, during that summer, Arnold was growing weary of the lack of appreciation he was receiving from Congress. He contemplated resigning, but was ordered by Washington to go to the assistance of Philip Schuyler's. I think I jumped forward. Yes, I did. Sorry about that. Getting so excited with this presentation, I'm just throwing my notes all over the place. But by the fall of 1776, the British are going to make a first attempt to try to move down from Canada and potentially sever the colonies in half. An army under Guy Carleton is going to begin building a fleet of boats at the head of Lake Champlain and in the Richelieu River, because at the southern end of the lake sees the Americans under Benedict Arnold and Horatio Gates begin constructing a small freshwater fleet of their own, about 16 vessels of various sizes. And this forces the British to spend weeks in constructing their own in order to clear Lake Champlain and open up that route south into New York. So on October 11th, Arnold is going to choose to make a stand about 60 miles north of Fort Ticonderoga. And the 2 navies are going to collide and fight until darkness near Valcour Island. The Americans are going to suffer heavily, and Arnold on his flagship Congress is going to be in the thick of the fighting the entire time. One of the gondolas lost is the Philadelphia, which you can see today displayed in the Smithsonian Institute of American History. At night, shielded by fog, Arnold and his ships are able to slip along the western coast of the lake past the British fleet and make their way towards the safety of Fort Ticonderoga. They will be pursued by Guy Carleton's navy for the next several days, and a running battle will be fought until finally Arnold is going to have to ground and destroy most of his vessels, while he and most of his men make their way on foot towards Fort Ticonderoga. Though this is a tactical defeat, Arnold's stand bought valuable time for Gates and his men to upgrade the defenses of Fort Ticonderoga. By the time Carleton's fleet gets to within sight of the fort, they're going to see that the defenses are too strong, and it's too late in the season to actually lay siege to the fort. So they'll turn around and retire back to Canada. And with the disasters in New York with Washington's Continental Army earlier that year, it's very possible that if the British were able to clear Lake Champlain, had not Arnold made his stand and then move further south to Albany and then link up with William Howe's British Army, the colonies could have very well been cut in half, and Washington's army cut between 2 British armies and potentially destroyed. So the war itself could have ended there in the fall of 1776 had it not been for Arnold and his ragtag fleet of gunboats. Arnold is praised for his efforts, but also criticized for needlessly sacrificing the Lake Champlain fleet for what many considered to be an attempt to win glory. This clearly was not the case. Well, in December of that year, Arnold is going to be ordered by Washington to take command of troops in Rhode Island to raise and train men to oppose the British threat after the loss of Newport. He stops off at his home and soon learns from Washington that Congress has promoted 5 lesser and junior brigadier generals to the rank of major general, passing over him. Congress claims that Connecticut had reached its quota for state's major generals. This is a massive snub to Arnold's service and to his honor. In late April, Arnold also learns of a British plan to raid the American supply depot at Danbury, Connecticut. He travels and takes command of local militia in the area and strikes the returning British force at Ridgefield on April 27th. During the fighting, Arnold is pinned underneath his horse, as you can see in this 1780 illustration that was actually done over in Great Britain. But he's pinned underneath his horse, and as the British are now charging towards him with bayonets fixed, one is going to point his rifle or musket at him and order him to surrender. And Arnold essentially says, like hell, and pulls out a pistol and shoots the British soldier dead, makes an escape, and gets away from the battlefield. For his service in Connecticut, he is finally promoted to Major General, but he does not receive senior rank over those others who he should have. So now moving forward to what Arnold is probably best known for his service in the American Army is the battles of Saratoga. And during the summer of 1777, he began to actually grow weary of the lack of appreciation he was receiving from Congress, and he contemplated resigning all out from the Army. But it's George Washington who then orders Arnold to go to the assistance of Philip Schuyler's Northern Department once again, which was threatened by a British offensive in New York from Canada, again under the command of General John Burgoyne. Another force under Barry St. Ledger is going to be moving to besiege the American Fort Stanwix in the Mohawk River Valley to the west. Well, with St. Ledger's force moving against Stanwix, Arnold is going to convince Philip Schuyler to allow him to march 800 men to lift the British siege of Fort Stanwix. The British allied Native Americans there learn of Arnold's arrival with a superior force, and they are going to abandon St. Ledger, forcing St. Ledger to end siege operations. So not even needing to get actually engaged in combat with the British near Fort Stanwix, just the sight and even learning that Arnold is on his way was enough for St. Ledger's Native Americans to lift the siege. The battles of Saratoga are going to be fought September 19th and October 7th, 1777 near modern-day Stillwater, New York, right along the Hudson River. John Burgoyne's army moves against General Horatio Gates. His defenses there in Bemis Heights. Gates replaces Schuyler because Schuyler is blamed for some American disasters and losses that take place during that campaign early on. And it is going to be Arnold on September 19th as the British are moving towards making a reconnaissance towards Gates's defenses. Arnold will be the one who urges Gates to come out of his defensive works and fight the British on the field of battle. And at Freeman's Farm on September 19th, according to some British witnesses, as the Americans move forward, Arnold is going to be pretty much everywhere, riding back and forth between his lines, funneling troops into the action, plugging gaps in the American line. And by the end of the day, even though the British will hold the field, they lose over 600 men as compared to the Americans' 350. So the British are stopped in their tracks there. And Arnold, even though he played such a significant role in this action, is going to be completely omitted from Horatio Gates's report to Congress. In learning of this, Arnold and Gates are going to get into a yelling match at Gates's headquarters. And when Benjamin Lincoln, who is senior to Arnold as a major general, arrives in camp, Gates is essentially going to strip Arnold of his command, Gates taking one wing of the army and giving Benjamin Lincoln the other wing. So Arnold is there in camp with no troops to command. He petitions Gates to give him a leave to head towards Philadelphia and link up with Washington's army, but it is Arnold's subordinates and the men under him who urge him to stay, that they do not want to fight under anybody else but him. And he will choose to stay, even though he's still without any kind of command. And at the Battle of Bemis Heights on October 7th, 1777, the Second Battle of Saratoga, when Burgoyne is going to try to force Gates out of his defenses again, Arnold is going to be on the field leading troops, even though he's not actually in command of anyone. This really shows Arnold's character and what the men underneath him thought, that they were going to follow him to hell and back, despite if he was their immediate general or not. And towards the climax of the fighting, as the American forces are swarming into the Bremen Redoubt near the northern part of Burgoyne's line, Arnold is going to be right there at the front, leading a flanking attack around the left side of this German-held redoubt. And it's in this process, as the German troops are falling back, they're going to turn around and fire a musket volley. One of the bullets is going to kill Arnold's horse, another smashes into his leg, and the horse falls on top of that leg, nearly shattering it. Arnold, still in much pain, pinned to the ground, is going to be yelling for his brave lads to move forward. Well, this American victory, even though Gates will take credit of it, on the British side, it is John Burgoyne who blames Arnold for his defeat. Arnold will then spend a significant time in a small Albany, New York field hospital, suffering from his own wound and hearing and seeing the suffering around him of the other American soldiers who were wounded during the fighting. Multiple surgeries are going to leave Arnold's left leg 2 inches shorter, forever giving him a limp and forever forcing him to walk with a cane. It's during this time that Arnold probably has a lot of time to mull over and kind of become trapped in his own head and grows more angry with how he has been treated in the past and how he's going to be treated in the future. This feeling of being underappreciated. Now Arnold has just given his leg for the cause of liberty. But he does have something to show for it, because his seniority as a major general is going to be restored, but he's still a little satisfied. So historians have agreed now that by this point, Arnold's pretty much gotten everything that he had been so angry about, but still he's kind of beyond the breaking point. And as the months are going to approach in the future, he's going to begin his downward spiral towards treason. So I always like to say that Benedict Arnold, the American, was actually killed there at the Battle of Saratoga. So Arnold's going to return to Connecticut to recover from his wounds, and eventually he reports to Washington in May 1778 for a new assignment. He's unable to ride and lead troops in the field, so he's made military governor of Philadelphia in June, following the evacuation of the British Army there earlier that month. He lived in the president's house on Market Street, which you can see an image of here. It was known as the Penn Mansion then, later the president's house, because both George Washington and John Adams will reside there during the presidencies. And he begins to live a much lavish life, one that he's always dreamed of. He's always had this vendetta kind of against his father, that he totally stripped his family of any prominence and riches. And now Arnold kind of feels that he needs to live up to his name that he believed that the family should have retained, and show everybody that the Arnolds still were a prominent American family. So he's going to be living this lavish life. He's going to the theaters, attending dinners and parties, and doing business with local families, regardless of their politics, if they're loyalists or patriots. And he's riding through the city in fancy carriages, which a lot of the Philadelphia radicals do not appreciate, because that is exactly what the British were doing while they occupied the town or city. But of course, yes, Arnold's riding in these fancy carriages, but he can't walk or ride himself right now. So how else is he going to get around town? In early 1779, he's going to begin courting 18-year-old Margaret Peggy Shippen. Her family's leanings were more so neutral. Her father kind of liked to be friends with everybody and keep his name out of others' mouths. But she longed to return to the grand life she had when the British occupied the city. They married in April 1779. And a month later, Arnold reaches out for the first time to Sir Henry Clinton to offer his assistance. Coincidence? And this is one of the biggest questions when it comes to Arnold and his treason, is how much of a role did his wife, Peggy Shippen, play in this? There's obviously not any hard evidence, but plenty of circumstantial evidence to show that if she didn't initiate talks with the British, she at least helped forward them along. And we know for a fact that after the war, when she returns to England with her husband, she is going to receive an annual pension for her services to the crown and for dangers faced. Now, what services and what dangers could those have been faced? if she had nothing to do with her husband's subsequent treason. So the jump to betraying his countrymen, it wasn't out of nowhere. Arnold was still distrusted Congress. He believed it was a body of men with only personal interests at heart who did not respect or understand those who fought, died, and were maimed on the field of battle. He also did not support America's new alliance with France. They were Britain's and her colonies' traditional enemy. America was fighting to rid itself of one monarchy. Why be handcuffed by yet another? And this isn't an isolated feeling to Benedict Arnold. Many at the time, when France joins the American war effort, are weary that should the war end and the colonies in France emerge victorious, that there's a potential threat that King Louis might try to conquer North America and take back his possessions that he had lost, or that they lost to Great Britain in the French and Indian War, and take even more. So Arnold is involved in some shady business dealings while in Philly. That's just very normal in the era. People profited off their positions, especially those in the military. He was accused of these by Joseph Reed and the Pennsylvania Supreme Executive Council. They are the executive body for the state of Pennsylvania, a very radical group filled with immense power, situated in Philadelphia. And this case went to Congress, who turned it over to Washington for a court-martial. The trial kept being delayed, and Reed worked to accumulate more evidence. Now, a lot of these charges against Arnold were pretty lackluster and bogus. He was accused of being too friendly to loyalists, accused of not being friendly enough to local militia, and accused of using state property wagons to transport his own goods. So this trial keeps being delayed until finally in December 1779, it is going to be held before a military court-martial in the Dickerson Tavern site here to the left in Morristown, New Jersey. And Arnold is going to be acquitted on all accounts, but this court-martial will ask Washington to issue him a reprimand. Now, this is pretty much the final straw for Arnold. Arnold had been one of Washington's biggest supporters. Washington had been one of Arnold's biggest supporters. Arnold believed that Washington was really his only ally. And now Washington is issuing this reprimand to him. Arnold must be feeling lonely. Who does he have left, if not Washington? Now I'll briefly highlight Major John Andre. Of the three people that are usually associated with Arnold's treason, it is Benedict Arnold, Peggy Shippen, and Major John Andre. Andre was born in May of 1750 and was commissioned in the 7th Regiment of Foot, 1771. He sent to North America in 1774 and was garrisoned at St. John. There he was captured during the Quebec campaign in 1775 and later exchanged when he becomes a staff officer with Major General Charles Gray. While garrisoned in Philadelphia with William Howe's British Army during the winter of 1777 to 78, he provided the army and citizenry with extravagant entertainment, including the famous Mischianza Ball, which is held in honor of Lord Howe's return to England. He befriended many of the local loyalist women, including Peggy Shippen. It is not known whether he courted her or not, but who's to say? People like to think of this as a love triangle, maybe, but most likely not. Andre was made chief of intelligence for Henry Clinton and later promoted to major and acting adjutant general. He would serve as the middleman between Arnold and Henry Clinton, and Peggy would assist in the delivery of messages between them, using her inner circle of loyalists to get messages into British-held New York City. To communicate, Arnold and Andre would use invisible ink between the lines of what looked like normal letters. The code was based on a book called Blackstone's Commentaries on the Laws of England. Each word of the message would consist of 3 numbers. The first was a page number, and the second and third numbers were which line and which word should be used. So if anyone was to intercept these letters, if they did not have a copy of Blackstone's Commentaries on the Laws of England, they would have no idea how to decipher this. Now, before we continue into Arnold's ultimate fall to treason, I would like to kind of point out how it's always been widely accepted that Benedict Arnold was seduced by British gold, that he was only out looking for riches. Now, it is true that this lavish life he's living in Philadelphia and the even more lavish life he's trying to provide for his new wife, Peggy Shippen is leaving him in a lot of debts. In fact, he buys Peggy a house there in Philadelphia, and they can't even live in it because he needs to rent it out in order to pay it off. But Arnold is the one who approaches the British first, not vice versa. And when he does, there's no actual request for any kind of payment. If he is to provide information and provide his services to the British, he is hoping that he can only receive compensation for the property that he could potentially lose should the British lose the war. So while money will play a big part in the end, that was not always the case in the story of Arnold's treason. So talks between the two sides are going to peter out for a little while, as Arnold cannot really provide the British with anything of much value or stuff that they did not already know. However, the talks are going to resume in July 1780. Again, keep in mind, this is after the court-martial Arnold undergoes and the reprimand from Washington. In that summer, Arnold is going to believe that he can get command of West Point in the Hudson Highlands. Why was West Point important? Well, West Point was a series of fortifications located where the present-day military academy is today, along the Hudson River. It's in an area known as the Hudson River Highlands, very mountainous terrain between New York City and Albany. So this is essentially the major water highway connecting the north into New York City. Now, where West Point is situated is where the Hudson River makes two pretty extravagant 90-degree bends. So it's very difficult to navigate for any large ships. So these forts would control that passage. So if West Point could be captured by the British, the Hudson River would fall into their hands. Again, like Guy Carleton had attempted and like John Burgoyne had attempted, to potentially sever the colonies in two. And at this point in the war, 1780, things are really going stagnant in the north. There's nothing going on. The action is really shifting towards the south, where the Patriots are seeing some major defeats. So such a critical loss like the fortifications at West Point for the American cause in 1780 could be a potential fatal blow. So in early August, Arnold is given command of the fortifications by Washington. He was surprised that Arnold did not seek an active command in the field. At one point, Washington is actually going to offer Arnold a command of a wing in his army for a potential attack on New York City that year, but Arnold is going to say that his leg is still too much in pain for him to ride or lead troops in the field. So Arnold is going to take command of the garrison, and he's going to go straight to work trying to plan to turn it over to the British. On July 24th, 1780, Major Andre is going to pen a letter to Arnold informing him that General Clinton had agreed to his terms of a payment of 20,000 pounds, which I think today is about $3 million or so, in exchange for the surrender of 3,000 men and the West Point fortifications. If he should be unable to accomplish this task, 10,000 pounds was still offered for his efforts. The message did not arrive until a month later, but Arnold responded 6 days later under the alias Gustavus and requested to set up a personal meeting in the near future with Andre. Now, it's not just Arnold that wants to meet in person with Andre. The British really don't want to put anything into action until they can meet with Arnold too. They want to make sure that they aren't being double-crossed. Okay, if Arnold is just trying to set them up so the Americans could bag a potential large British force. But this meeting between Arnold and Andre will be set up for September 21st through 22nd. Arnold's going to continue his work at weakening the garrison and fortifications to prepare for a coordinated British assault. And he knows that Washington and his staff will be traveling to West Point on the 25th after a meeting with the French in Connecticut to review the garrison and the fortifications. Arnold hopes that maybe he could kill two birds with one stone and have Washington captured as well. Now, even if West Point itself wouldn't fall, just the capture of Washington could be enough to spell doom for the American cause. Now, this illustration here is one of my favorite in regard to this topic. It is called The Tempter and the Traitor. It depicts the meeting that will take place just below Stony Point, New York, about 15 miles south of West Point, on the early morning, around 1 o'clock on September 22nd, 1780, between John Andre to the left and Benedict Arnold to the right. You can see the Hudson River in the back. And then if you look just above Andre's head, you can see a snake slithering its way through the trees. Temptation. But that meeting is going to last well into the morning between these two. Andre had traveled to Haverstraw, New York, below Stony Point, along a sloop known as the Vulture. And his plan was to have this meeting quickly so then he could get back to the Vulture and head towards New York City with this coordinated plan. However, as it begins to grow light out, they are going to take Andre to a safe house nearby. And it's during this time when the meeting's continuing in this safe house that American gun batteries along the Hudson fire on Andre's getaway vessel. So the Vulture is forced to retreat, and now Andre has no way back to New York City. So amidst this, Arnold and Andre are going to come up with a plan to put Andre into some civilian clothing and take these important documents about West Point, slip him in Andre's boot, and Benedict Arnold is going to write out a pass for Andre that could hopefully get him through the area on the east side of the Hudson River known as the Neutral Ground. That was basically patrolled by bands of highwaymen and local militia known as Skinners and Cowboys. On September 23rd, Andre is going to make his journey back towards New York City with another man, Joshua Het Smith, who Arnold has enlisted. Smith takes Andre back as far as Tarrytown, New York, and then he leaves them. And Andre is going to be surrounded by three men. He believes that these are potentially loyalists, so Andre outs himself as being a British officer. And it's at this point that these local patriot militia or highwaymen are going to strip Andre of his clothing, looking for his valuables, and they find that pass signed by Benedict Arnold and those important West Point documents in Andre's boots. So those documents will be sent to the American camp at Newcastle, New York, where Lieutenant Colonel John Jameson of the 3rd Continental Dragoons will take a look at them. He doesn't believe that there could be any works of treason here, especially not from somebody with the name Benedict Arnold. So Jameson is going to order Andre and a rider back to Arnold to let him know that this man, whose name was John Anderson, which was the name that Andre went under during their correspondence between Andre and Arnold. And Benjamin Talmadge, the head of Washington's chief intelligence officer, is going to take a look at these documents as well. And he's going to order Jameson to bring Andre back. Something is obviously in the works here. So now these documents are forwarded to George Washington. So it's a race against time now as two riders are heading in the direction of West Point and towards Washington. Which riders will arrive first? Well, the one that's heading towards West Point and Arnold will arrive. So Arnold learns that John Andre has now been captured, and it is only a matter of time before Washington finds out, if he did not find out already. So they were supposed to be meeting for breakfast that morning. Washington had not arrived yet. So Arnold tells one of his staff officers as he's heading down towards Stony Point to conduct some business and will be back soon. He mounts his horse, makes his way to the river, hops on his personal boat, and orders some of his men to row him down towards the Vulture, Andre's ship below Stony Point. So Arnold is able to escape. Unfortunately for Major Andre, he is not able to. He is imprisoned in Tappan, New York, will be tried by some top-tier American generals, including Nathaniel Greene, and he is found guilty of espionage. On October 2nd, 1781, he will be hanged and executed. So it's also known to make mention of one of the more dramatic moments of this entire incident is when Washington does find out that Arnold has attempted to turn West Point over. According to the Marquis de Lafayette in his memoirs, Washington will say, "Arnold has betrayed us. Whom can we trust now?" I feel that really does summarize the connection and the partnership that him and Benedict Arnold did actually have, that Washington was actually taken aback and devastated by what has happened. And he will be furious at this as well. After this moment of despair passes, he's going to send Alexander Hamilton and James McHenry, two of his staff officers, down towards Kings Ferry near Stony Point to try to intercept Arnold, but it is too late. And Washington will be quoted as saying that he wants Arnold on a gibbet, meaning that he wants him captured, hanged, and when he's dead, have his body placed in iron and hung there until it rots for everybody to see, to send a message to any potential traitors. Well, now Arnold has escaped to New York City, and he is going to be commissioned a brigadier general in His Majesty's forces. So he has swapped his blue Continental Army officer's coat for a scarlet one. While he's in New York, he is going to raise the American Legion, a loyalist unit, hoping to also entice former patriots to come and fight for him. And in New York City, the first attempt to try to capture Arnold is going to be put into motion when a Virginian named John Champ is going to desert and join the American Legion. And he plans to capture Arnold at his home in the middle of the night when he's making his nightly bathroom trip before he goes to bed. This plot fails, however, when Arnold is going to be ordered by Clinton in January 1781 to head down to Virginia with a force of several thousand men. So in Virginia, Arnold is going to wreak havoc along the James River, and he burns Richmond after Governor Jefferson refuses to turn over the stores there. A 5,000-pound bounty is placed on Arnold's head. Marquis de Lafayette is going to be sent down by Washington with his force south to try to capture Arnold. But by this point, it's going to be too late. Arnold is heading back towards New York City when Charles Cornwallis arrives to take command of those forces in the south. So while sitting idly in New York City, Arnold is going to be urging Clinton to attempt to, or to allow him to move back down to the south or launch another raid somewhere else. And he'll be given permission in September 1781 to lead a force into his home state of Connecticut towards New London, not far from his birthplace and hometown, Norwich and then New Haven. And there, where the Patriot Supply Depot is at New London, he is going to set the munition stores ablaze, and that fire is going to spread, nearly burning the town. Just to the other side of the Thames River, across from Arnold, another British force under his command is going to be assaulting a Patriot fort known as Fort Griswold, and Arnold sees that these defenses are too strong, so he'll attempt to order his men to call off the attack, but it is too late. The courier does not arrive in time, and these British soldiers are let loose on this Patriot fortification. And as it's said that a lot of these patriots attempt to surrender, Arnold's men show them no mercy. And this will forever be known as the Fort Griswold Massacre. So it's said by Benjamin Franklin that Arnold's case of treason was so much worse than anything, especially that towards Judas. It's quoted on saying, Judas sold only one man. Arnold sold 3 millions. Arnold's treason, though he thought he was doing this in the best interest of his countrymen, that it was time for this bloodshed to end, to go back to the king. In the end, it's going to do more to rally towards the Patriot cause than to deter the Patriot effort, as more men will enlist and they rally around their hatred for Benedict Arnold. So in December 1781, as the war is winding down after the surrender of Yorktown, Arnold is going to travel with Peggy to London, never to return to the United States again. He tried to convince King George III to send him back after the surrender of Yorktown and continue the war in earnest. After the war, he failed on multiple occasions to get a commission. It was probably because no one trusted him to not betray another cause, honestly. He tried at various business ventures, including in New Brunswick, where many loyalists had been displaced from the colonies. He'll succeed momentarily there, but then fail and be forced to return back to London. In the end, however, he never obtained the glory that he had earned in America prior to committing treason. He died on June 14th, 1801. He and Peggy are buried in a crypt in the basement of St. Mary's Church in Battersea, London. The basement today is utilized as a daycare facility. So Arnold himself is not really honored by name on any monument here in the United States. One of the more famous Revolutionary War battlefield monuments is probably the 1887 Boot Monument that was erected by John Watts de Peyster, a former general of New York State's militia during the Civil War. It was located near the site of the Bremen Redoubt, where Arnold received that terrible leg wound but led his men to glory in what this monument describes as the decisive battle of the American Revolution. But one thing that I agree with this monument, and I'd ask others to challenge it, is that first line right there. In memory of the most brilliant soldier of the Continental Army. I know a few weeks ago when Emerging Revolutionary War had our annual symposium done virtually, one of the questions I asked the panelists, the speakers that day was, since George Washington wasn't known to be a tactical genius, who was the best tactical commander in the American army? Some of them said Daniel Morgan, but then at the end, it seemed they all kind of reluctantly had to bite their lip and say Benedict Arnold. And this is very true, because if it was not for Arnold in those first few years of the American Revolution, it's very, very possible, almost certain, that the American cause for independence would have floundered. His battlefield victories came when there was nothing but dark defeats everywhere else in the country. Now, that's why I think looking at Benedict Arnold, it's important to understand the context. It's important to, yes, agree that it is completely unexcusable what he did. He betrayed his country and everything he supposedly believed in. But so for him, he did it for ideological reasons. But we can look at him in two parts. You can look at him as Benedict Arnold, the American, and Benedict Arnold, the traitor, and at least appreciate and respect the fact of what he gave and what he sacrificed for our country when we needed it the most. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Billy. We really appreciate that dissection of Benedict Arnold's life. We'll give you a break for just a second. We do have a few questions. One of them you did answer, and that was the monument, the question about the monument. It was sponsored by some British men. No, as Billy pointed out, it was John Watts de Peyster Sr., who's actually on the Saratoga Battlefield Monuments Commission. A lady named Mrs. Ellen Hardin Walworth is going to write a fantastic history, and she's prolific in helping to preserve the battlefield up there, as well as the interpreting the battlefield in the late 1800s. So you can learn more about that monument there. If you like to head over to archive.org, you can download the Saratoga Monument Association booklet and read all about it. I do think it's curious that de Peyster is going to also write later in life a biography of Dan Sickles. So it seems like he has an affinity for guys who've been wounded in the leg.
Everyone loves to hate.
Yeah. so he writes a few actually different biographies, including one of Dan Sickles after the war. So hit you with a few questions here. First question is, after Arnold's battles at Saratoga and he moved into the president's house in Philly, what had become of Arnold's children?
The children will remain with his sister. There's 3 children from his first marriage. I believe Hannah is going to eventually come to Philadelphia. So I believe she does take the children with her. You don't hear too much about them, at least during that time period. And then he will eventually have 5 children with Peggy Shippen, the first being born in 1780. So I always like to think when money becomes an issue for him and he is looking for some compensation and payment for what he's going to do, he has, his family's interests in mind too. Not only is it to pay off his debts, but to hopefully provide for his new family and his previous marriage family too.
Yeah, and he and 2 of his sons come back to Canada, don't they? And open a store there.
They head to New Brunswick, and then they go to St. John for a little bit after that. And Arnold falls into a lot of debt. He apparently he has problems suing pretty popular people there in St. John. So at one point, the populace there is actually going to be marching effigies of him, not because he was a traitor to America, but because he's suing the wrong people. So yeah, everywhere he goes, he just seems to get into trouble. He never seems to have good personal relationships with people. And that's why I think it was so fascinating how him and Washington, both men of impeccable honor and temper, that they get along so well.
Yeah, it's funny. He's so litigious later in life. And it's funny you talk about him not getting along. The Saratoga campaign, or at least the lead up to Ticonderoga and then what happens at Saratoga's battles, is fascinating to read about all of the different personalities and how they do and don't work with one another. Philip Schuyler's hated by the New England militia, and they try to get rid of him. And then up comes Gates, and Gates gets booted. Then comes back in Schuyler. Then he gets booted for Gates. And then, here comes Arnold, who doesn't get along with Gates. Like, it's just a laundry list of people. And then there's just the terrible Arthur St. Clair who can't do anything right. So that's an amazing part to read more about. Let's see what else we have here. Okay, what was the relationship between Washington and Arnold? Was it just a military relationship, or did Washington try to protect Arnold from himself? It's a pretty accurate question.
Yeah, no, that's good. Washington, for the longest point, had been lobbying Congress to promote Arnold to Major General and to have his seniority restored. So even though they never actually, work together on a battlefield, I think Washington really does see Arnold as like his right-hand man, where he can send Arnold anywhere he wants, and he knows that the job is going to get done, that he can trust him to make the right decisions. So yeah, Arnold, during that whole time with the court-martial debacle going on because of Joseph Reed and the Pennsylvania Supreme Executive Council, at one point, Arnold is begging in a very emotional letter, begging Washington to just get this done with him. If they find me guilty, just have me hanged right now. So Washington is really trying to calm Arnold down and basically say, like, this is going to work out. Hang in there. Don't do anything rash because we still need you here.
Yeah, he, in some ways, he reminds me of John Adams, who can be his own worst enemy. But, Adams is a patriot through and through, whereas, Arnold turns into a traitor. There's a comment from Mike who says, Arnold also had a plaque honoring him in West Point Chapel, but his name is not on the plaque. He also had a fort at West Point that was renamed from Fort Arnold to Fort Clinton. So that's no longer there as well. So let's see.
The Saratoga Battle Monument, too, as well. It has the 4 statues on it, and one of the pedestals is empty. That's obviously supposed to represent Arnold.
I mean, it's amazing. And there actually, you can go over to archive.org and download an entire pamphlet, about 55 pages, about the Saratoga Battle Monument if you want to do that. Those are all free over there. Let's see here. Did Washington actually reprimand Arnold, and was it written and circulated amongst the population?
I don't believe it was circulated amongst the population, but when other editors obviously get a hold of it, they're going to be publishing it, so it will be widely known. And I think using the word honor for this time period, it's honor is reputation for them. So something like that. And by that point, 1778, 79, Arnold his reputation in his mind has been slandered more times than he can count, with a lot of the promotions that he did not receive when he definitely was due. I mean, at that point in the war, who had honestly given more than Benedict Arnold, who had more experience commanding in the different theaters than Benedict Arnold? So for him, once this stuff is published, he's going to be writing letters himself, trying to, I think after the court-martial, he actually has rights to papers in England, in London, to have his name, try to have his name saved. Because of that court-martial, explaining how it was all egregious slights against him. And then after he does betray his country, he does write essentially an open letter to the people of the colonies explaining why he did this. But tempers and passions were too hot at that point for anybody to even care what it said.
Yeah, I mean, it says a lot with, how hurt Washington was. I mean, Washington wanted that guy's head basically on a pike.
Yeah, I said it in gibbets.
Yeah, I mean, he's outright ordering Light Horse Harry Lee to go and get him at one point and try to capture the guy. That says a lot. And let's see here, the what if, in the memory of Americans, if Benedict Arnold, what if Benedict Arnold would have been killed at Saratoga? What do you think of his martyrdom then?
It was said that after Arnold had been wounded and he was being treated, he had told people that he had wished that the bullet had hit him in his heart instead. And that probably, he would have died a hero. In the American Hall of Heroes, he would have been standing there right next to George Washington as a hero of the American cause. But there's another question to be asked there. What if he had not died, or what if he had not even been wounded, or just slightly wounded? What would Benedict Arnold's fate been? Where he wouldn't have had that leg wound. He wouldn't have had to become military governor of Philadelphia. He could have still served in the field. And I think, writing that book on Monmouth, I believe that he potentially could have commanded maybe the advance guard of Washington's army there, or at least a large portion of it. And he probably would have served in Washington's main army. After that, and keeping into the field, his mind would have been occupied, and maybe he would have felt then that he was finally getting the recognition he deserved. And he obviously would have never met Peggy Shippen and been so idle in Philadelphia. So yeah, if he dies, he becomes a hero. And I think if he's not wounded or just slightly wounded, he becomes an American hero as well and doesn't turn.
So Washington wants to give him, command of part of the army, the left of the army. So yeah, it says a lot there. Billy, what do you think is the best biography of Benedict Arnold?
Oh, yeah, I got it right here. This one right here. Probably the newest one that came out in 2019, written by British historian Stephen Bromwell. This, in my opinion, is the most definitive modern biography on Benedict Arnold. And it tackles a lot of, with his motives, a lot of different angles that other historians may not have ignored, but really didn't consider to play large factors, such as his ideologies. What he believed when it came to France, what he believed in that time of the war, where it was in the best interest of his countrymen, why he did what he did, that it was time for the war to end and for us to return to the status quo before the war.
Awesome.
That's an excellent one. If you go on YouTube too, there's a lot of Stephen Bromwell podcast interviews and lectures too that are just fantastic.
It's amazing, all these hundreds of years removed, he is still a polarizing person, and he's one of those people that are not forgotten from the revolution, even though his name is not on the monuments. So it's an interesting and fascinating person to study. So, Billy, we're at 2:00. I want to thank you for joining us today. And I want to thank our audience for watching. Head over to battlefields.org or over to our YouTube channel. We do have Benedict Arnold in 4. You can learn more about Benedict Arnold there. Jim Prococo, our former teacher in residence, explores his life, and you can head over to battlefields.org and read a little bit more about him. Check out Emerging Revolutionary War. Head over to that blog. You can check out Billy's book. You can check out their latest book on the winter encampment at Valley Forge by Phil Greenwald. That book's coming out this week, so you can pick that up hot off the presses through Savas Beatty and the Emerging Revolutionary War series. So, Billy, I want to thank you for being a part of this, and I want to thank everyone for watching and for supporting battlefield preservation. I'm Chris White with the American Battlefield Trust. Thanks for joining us this afternoon.